presented in a scale, so it's like a smaller to gradually like to bigger, or the same scale of one shape? And does it has to be just one shape throughout the whole picture? And the second question, so it's only one hue that we're like that's progressing to lighter and darker,
Yes. So
not
yeah, so
mixed, like
the so
dark
the
light, dark.
um, the in terms of the color, you choose one hue, and a monochromatic color scheme or scale uses only one hue, and then you use different values and saturations. So you use different values of it, which gives you different saturations of a single hue. So there's no other color added to it. It's just, you choose blue, you choose green, you choose yellow. You lighten it, darken it, and create as even a scale as you can. Then to create something, we could do this with just rectangular strips of color to demonstrate that to demonstrate the transition of the color and the value in the color. But I wanted to combine it with a design element, that being coming up with a repetition of shape in a scale, like just like a linear pattern. And so there are a lot of ways to solve that. And that's something I'll talk. That's what I want to do some drawing and talk about how you're going to, just like strategies for beginning.
Because in those examples, the scale is the same of the shape. So I don't know if we're supposed to also do the same or just like play with the scale. Like let's say it's getting smaller when we go to the right side
You could,
or left.
if you wanted to, you could, yeah. I'm open to your interpretation. So, but I guess that would be you know, um, a different application of the term scale, which is fine with me. But I would, it's simpler if it's, if the repetition is, I guess, the repetition can be the same, of the pattern left to right. They could be the same size or the same scale, but then you're creating a scale, meaning the scale is in the color, not in the dimensions of the piece of the pattern.
Oh, okay, I see. So we can just like make one shape and then cut it out of the each color or each like well like shade or whatever we're gonna have in the end, using the same like let's say template of the shape.
Yes. Yes. Now, if we look at, excuse me, Egyptian pattern design, the ancient Egyptian culture produced a lot of art and architecture, and a lot in terms of decorative arts. And if you look at, if you want to look at different, motifs, and by a motif, that's like, motif is like a symbolic image in pattern, is one way that you can put that. And the lotus was one that was very common. So like that there, and the term stylization in art and design is when you take something more complex and simplify it, or you simplify something. So you simplify something and make it a little bit more symbolic, but still recognizable as that thing. But even like with like this, this pattern, the lotus is probably, I mean, this motif right here is a little bit more complicated, but you can also, you could pull something from like a simpler version or like a part of this pattern down at the bottom. So what I want you all to look, I want you to look at designs, and I want you to pull some of your pull some of your ideas from designs, because I don't want you to just make this up completely. I don't want you to just something that's excessively simple pulled out of your head. I will show you how to do work in how to begin. I want you to start simply with the basic geometric shape. So like Egyptian pattern, Maori pattern, which is South Pacific. Some of this stuff can get way more complicated than necessary, but I would want you to look for some simpler stuff, like some of these could be simplified, like even just this shape without the white border could work really well. All right. So, and then if you choose, if you work with like this kind of pattern, like the Maori pattern, I'm going to want you to do some research and tell me, like, write something for me about it. And I'm going to want you to use library resources in order to do it. And I'll put together information about how you will do that. But first, I want you to start thinking about designs and repetition without thinking too much about the resolved version of it. Why are you sideways? Just a moment here. There we go. Okay. Well, the basics of pattern. Let me just get something bigger to draw with. All right. So basic geometry: circle, rectangle, triangle. So the circle, rectangle, triangle The circle gives you the curve, rectangle, vertical, and horizontal. And the triangle gives you the diagonal. So if you begin very simply, I'm going to measure off the edge of my drawing pad here. So I'm going to do like a 2. There. Give myself marks at 1-inch intervals. Back up here. So I want you to start by just mapping out a horizontal section like that. Okay. Okay. I already have a pattern now. But let's say, well, triangle is actually pretty easy. I can start, if you just draw a diagonal from corner to corner like this, you will start to get the basics of a lot of pattern design. Like that. So visually, you get this sawtooth zigzag, which is kind of cool. And you can imagine if this were like, the middle value hue, and then this is the very lightest and this is the very darkest, you would see that transition, and you would really make you very much aware of this edge and this very, very sharp edge. I want you to do this pattern in 12 or more steps of change, also known as intervals. Okay? 12 or more steps of change. My example here has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Almost. It ran out of room. You'll be able to get the idea here. So I've got this. So here I'm using the diagonal. You always get this, I get a horizontal and I get a diagonal. So I'm going like, you can imagine it goes, there's going to be this straight line along the bottom here. Now, I don't want you to be content with just this. Let's say, for example, I decide I want to do something a little more interesting. Boop. I'm going to put a mark at 1 inch halfway. So I know where the midpoint is on the hypotenuse of that triangle. And I, freehand, will, what do I want to do with that? So I want to try some things here. I want to do something maybe, that's what I want. Right there, that's it. There, put that back. And I'm going to, how tall did that go? I think I'm going to have to measure that too. I think it's worth it. You do the same thing, like make a template when you arrive at this finished shape. You'll do the same thing of making a template and tracing it, so you only have to carefully measure the shape of it once for cutting it out. I want this little thorn to come up 1/4 of an inch and then go down 1/4 of an inch. Right. This pattern, it has to be consistent as a regular repetition. As long as I can just make marks here for guidance. All right, so I wanted to go up. And then curve it down to the, get into this kind of like more rhythmic. Now, as long as this is close, yeah, now that I see it, I don't really like it that much. Oh, well, I mean, I could spend some time working on like freehand drawings. I might try to like curve that a little bit. No, I think that's maybe a little too soon to start introducing that little flourish right there. That should probably come later in the pattern process. Yeah, so something that might be simpler here, if I have this, I've got this diagonal. Curve it just like having the straight diagonal helps me have some notion of where my curve should go, because I can see there's this shape here that I've removed from the triangle that creates, it's a much different visual experience to see that curve there. It's possible I might want to just like bring a little extra curve back up here. But you know, this is just like, I want you to spend some time playing around with repetition. You know, so like here, I think if I'm going to add this like little extra bit right here, I think that this, I should measure that so that I can repeat it. Like I should measure from here to here, measure from here to here, so that I can repeat it in the same, like I just repeat it throughout the entire thing. So, I mean, this is going from triangle to curve. So it has elements of both the triangle and the circle and the rectangle. It's got the horizontal. Started with a diagonal. It's got this really like steep diagonal curve on it. That's all right. That is all right. Okay. So, and then here, now I'm seeing this as, actually I'm seeing like this kind of cool shape that appears. When you start doing this repetition, sometimes you start to see like in the negative can become a more interesting shape. Like maybe like that right there now I think is kind of cool. Okay. Where is my tracing paper? All right. So we use tracing paper so that you don't have to keep redrawing everything. Go down here. All right. So since I am drawing this out to work things out, I think I'm just going to freehand that there. Good. Here's my middle. in the middle. Okay, there's one right down the center. I want to see this in the middle. So if I repeat a rectangle, and approximate in the middle, okay. So I would like to stress to you that coming up with some interesting pattern just by combining, using geometry and combining geometric shape and repeating geometric shape is really just the start. I will want you to look at pattern design that has been done that is like historical and or cultural. But this works. This repetition works really well. This could be the middle value could be inside here, and the transition of value on the larger shape. So if this is like not sure if I like that. So here I've got rectangle. Well, now you could, if you have colored pencils, you could try. See, I have an array of colored pencils here. I don't expect that you do have them. You were not told to buy them. But that is something where you could do a little bit of drawing. This one here is a very dark blue. That's a very light blue. White won't show up on the paper, but white you can use to adjust some other color. It's going to mix with the graphite and get kind of goofy. Yeah, mixing colored pencil on paper is not always possible. It doesn't always want to do it. but just as a limited demonstration. Give you an idea of what that might look like. The test here. Darken that a little bit. That's good. Suppose if I had to, erase a little bit of that. Better. Good, that's better. I can just use the eraser and make that color a little bit less solid. Try to get make the appearance of a lighter value of it. Yeah. By the way, I was looking up. I was looking at a book on color. Like it's really like more like color in physics. It's sort of like more like a treatment of color for physics. And I was reminded in like some statement by the author that color, like when we see color, this is it's a mental phenomenon that we see that color. The actual light energy doesn't have color. Our brains create the color, where we create that appearance. Like we separate the brain. Our human brain has learned to organize, like create representations of these different wavelengths of light energy into, which is really like part of the electromagnetic spectrum, into these different appearances, which we call color. So it's very interesting that when you look at something that's blue, there's some difference in the surface that our brains translate into blue, and like the idea like light bounces off of surfaces, and the blue is that it's absorbing a certain like wavelength of energy, and and it's that one that we call blue is what we see. If it's red, it's a slightly different wavelength, and is measured in nanometers, which is very fine distinctions. So interesting. Sometimes maybe a little difficult to believe, but apparently color is something that our brains invented. As a way of organizing information. I don't like that little nub. Okay. So if I were to do this, you can see if I go really light with it, I can use the paper as part of like to lighten the color, and if I press harder, I get a different value of the hue. Now these colored pencils are not all from the same blue. Like this one that I'm using right now has got more violet. It's like biased toward violet. So I think I would layer this other one that is like a little bit more on the green, a little more on like the green side, or maybe just sort of like straight, like down the middle blue. But like if you have blue, green is up here, violet is down here, and you have blue-green and blue-violet as the tertiaries around blue. You can have blue, like you could do finer and finer distinctions between blue and blue-violet and get blue-violet-blue, which is 2 parts blue, 1 part violet, which would sit somewhere like in here. And you can get, like blues that are just like a little bit toward violet or a little bit toward green, and they'll have a different appearance, like these two. These two blues, you can see, hopefully, there's a little difference. I can see that there's some violet here, maybe a little green, or just straight up blue. There's a color in like a paint color, like in oil paint, like fine art painting, ultramarine. And ultramarine is a very common color that you'd see in paint, like oil paint, acrylic paint, watercolor, or gouache. And ultramarine is blue with a bias toward violet. It's like right somewhere like down there. Cobalt is a blue that's biased toward green. But it's not blue-green. This, ultramarine is not blue-violet, but you can see a difference, big difference between cobalt and ultramarine blue. I didn't know that, and when I was a student, I took painting classes, and I bought whatever. I just thought, like, I got blue, I got red, I got yellow, and my blue was cobalt, and when I mixed it with my red, because of the slight presence of green in it, it made the range of violet dull, because there was a little bit of the presence of the complement green with the red. And so I didn't get these like rich, vibrant violets I was expecting, and it just looked kind of, muddy, dark, and that was why. I didn't know that. But I didn't take color theory. I thought color theory when I was a student was for suckers who just couldn't figure it out on their own. And I was wrong, because I made a lot of bad paintings thinking that I knew what I was doing. And I had to come to the conclusion that I really couldn't, I didn't know how to control the color. And then I ended up just, not taking the color class, took printmaking and a lot of drawing classes. I figured out some aspects of color on my own, dropped out of college, went back to college and got a BA in history, so I never took the color class. And when I started teaching, at Harrington Institute of Interior Design, one of the classes they wanted me to teach was color. And before they gave me my own class, they wanted me to sit in on, basically assist one of my colleagues and observe. They paid me, but not as much as teaching a class. But I observed so that I could understand the way they wanted the course taught and see what all the stuff is for the course. And I sat in like that first when I sat there assisting and observing, I just remember thinking over and over again, oh, this would have been so helpful when I was in college if I would have known these things. Well, hello, little panda. My little baby is here. Hey, move your butt. Can you put yourself right there? Yes. Put yourself right there. So you're not blocking the camera. Good boy. No, a little bit back, hon. Oh, he's the star of the show. Let's see, we cannot see this, so we're gonna have to get Elliot distracted over here. Okay. Can I have this? You want to be as close as possible, I know. But I'm trying to do a demonstration. Good boy, thank you. You're such a nice cat. Okay, so this is my darkest blue. Which is called indigo, which is on the spectrum of visible light. As I mentioned, the spectrum of visible light and the artist spectrum, which gives you the color wheel, are not exactly the same. Two differences in the light spectrum colors and the I guess the color, like the material color, like comes from dyes and pigments. One, in the spectrum of light, there's a seventh hue, and the seventh hue is indigo. Isaac Newton did that. He insisted that there's another one he can see, and it's between blue and violet is indigo on the spectrum of visible light. And another difference, which is an important difference, is that in the primaries of light, the primaries are red, blue, and green. Yellow in the spectrum of visible light is not a primary. One of the reasons for that is that green is dominant in our vision. It is right in the middle of what we see on the spectrum of light. There we go. Hey, that's not bad. That's not bad. Good. So with any, like the lightest, the darkest you want to see, the you want to see color in it. Here, look out, Elliot. Look out. Here. There. Is it going to bother you? Okay, I'm going to stop that. Where is it? Are you lying on the marker? You can stay, just don't plop yourself right down in the middle of everything. What in the world did I put that? Oh, my glasses are on. Okay. Um, So light spectrum or spectrum of visible light red, orange, yellow. Green is usually separated. Blue, indigo, violet. That is a clumsy acronym, and you can't really, it's not really a word, but red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. That's in light energy. Primaries are red, green, and blue. And when you mix these three, you get a clear, colorless light. They cancel out the appearance of light. When you mix, I need a new one of these. Oh God, to refill this. What is often referred to as the artist's spectrum? That is like, I guess you could say, material colorants. So not light, but pigment. Dyes. Chemical colorants are used for industrial purposes because they can be produced in great enough quantities that you can actually, color a lot of like upholstery fabric or fabric for clothing. If you're trying to use like a natural dyes and pigments, it would be extremely expensive to produce most colors at any sort of quantity. There's an entire book written about the color mauve, which was a very fashionable color in Europe, especially in the 19th century. And the colorant to create that sort of like violet, this sort of like grayish violet color of mauve, the natural pigments were very expensive to acquire and to use, and so there was a chemist that came up with the first artificial mauve, and it's actually a pretty interesting book if you're geeking out on color. It's about, a lot of it is about the growth of chemistry as an industrial process, which was really necessary because of the growth of a middle class and people who had money to spend on products. And then you have the Industrial Revolution churning out products, and they needed less expensive ways to do it. So anyhow, colorants, dyes, and pigments. The primaries are red, yellow, and blue. Are the primaries. And so we use the artist's spectrum, but I want you to be aware of the spectrum of visible light, which is just energy that we can see. Okay. All right. So, Claudia, do you have any questions about that?
No, I will brainstorm next week and try to come up with design.
Yeah. So start just, I think for me, one thing important to me in the design, just like in your design process, is when you begin. Oh, Elliot, look at all the dandruff on your back. Ugh. He likes brushing, but by getting your diet too rich or something. Anyhow, I think we're going to stop sharing, even though Elliot really wants to be on camera. What to me is very important for me in design process that you begin just running through lots of ideas and
narrow it down.
Yeah, just like produce a lot of ideas so that you've got some things to choose from. And once you work with some geometry, I mean, you can see. Let me share this screen again. If you take like some of these are maybe better examples with like this. You hopefully you could see where you can get from geometry to like this, like some of these like bands of pattern. Oh, hush. And then you might start looking at some of this stuff and think like discover something that's even more cool that you might want to try to use. Okay. Now I will say the Maori pattern and tattoos, they're sort of like famous for their tattoos. Um, a lot of that has been borrowed and I guess the term is often used as co-opted by people who are not from that culture. Um, you can, I think it's important to look at, understand which designs have been, can be found in which cultures. That doesn't mean that you would like design something just ripping off Maori design and then saying, look at this thing I invented, because you didn't invent it. Um, I think a lot of people have gotten Maori tattoos without really knowing that there is significance to them in that culture, um, and so something to be aware of. It doesn't mean you can't use it. I mean, I think you should. You should. Um, you have to look at things. You have to look at examples, and there in pattern design there are so many examples. If you look at any ancient culture, you will find geometric pattern. Early Greek, like the earliest Greek, the earliest Egyptian, the earliest Persian, the earliest Chinese, Indian, anywhere, anywhere. The Irish are famous for um, pattern design. Um, everybody, it's find a culture that didn't do it is it'd be the bigger challenge. Okay,
Okay.
great. Well, you have a good spring break.
How is this working? So